right now, right at this time, 2 days ago, I was asked if I could possibly step into the sizable shoes of Professor Maisto. Now, it's not a surprise. Everybody knows he's a giant in international tax and a seasoned tax practitioner and an academic. He couldn't attend and was scheduled to give this lecture to you. But his own lecture to you. If I perchance could step in from him, for him was the question that Mukesh asked me. Ladies and gentlemen, I felt that this was asking a mere tax practitioner like me to step in and present the Albert Einstein lecture on physics. I need not remind you that Albert Einstein won a prize that's available for achievements that have conferred the greatest benefit to humankind, the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1921. Well, who can live up to that standard? On top of that, full disclosure. While I'm passionate about international tax and transfer pricing, I cannot hold a candle to Professor Maisto's vast knowledge and experience and his significance as a practitioner and scholar in international tax. And then it's not just a lecture, it's the Klaus Vogel lecture. His book on double taxation conventions is regarded as the international gold standard on the law of tax treaties. But how on earth could I not help out for this always impressive and inspiring conference that has always led me to go home and say, now wait a minute, I need to look into that particular issue again because I might have not fully understand or fully grasped the depth of it. So I hope I can do some justice to Professor Maisto and to the organizers of the conference in this respect. The conference regards harmonizing international tax cooperation in the era of sustainable development. I wish it was called Harmonizing International Tax Cooperation to Achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, from my perspective. And in that field, I hope to present you an issue and puzzle that's keeping me busy and is intriguing me on a daily basis in my practice right now. And I'm actually asking you, all of you here, to think along and help resolve this puzzle. It's a Rubik's Cube. You know the Rubik's Cube? I will ask you to help resolve it, the taxation of carbon credits or offsets. And before I present you all the sides of this Rubik's Cube so you can see how you can get them all to match, so you know what the challenge is, allow me to set a little bit of the backdrop of this discussion. So by the end of 2021, over 80 countries, representing almost 75% of global emissions, announced commitments to achieve net zero emissions. And what is a commitment? A commitment is basically implementing decarbonization rules or legislation that serves to transform business and economies to achieve that net zero. So following the Paris Agreement of 2015 on climate change, countries party to the agreement put climate plans in place to cut their greenhouse gas or GHG emissions, and they set nationally determined contributions. So they would nationally not emit more than this many tons of greenhouse gas, and above it, they would take actions to reduce that. And that serves to measure progression towards the reducing their emissions. Now, there are a lot of measures. There are a lot of ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to help mitigate climate change. You can retire coal plants, you can invest in clean energy and efficiency, you can retrofit and decarbonize buildings, you can decarbonize cement and steel and plastics, you can shift to electric vehicles, you can increase public transportation, electric transportation that is, you can decarbonize aviation and shipping, you can halt deforestation, you can restore degraded lands, even reduce food loss and waste, or improve agricultural practices, or eat more plants and less meat, or just bike and walk instead of using fossil fueled powered transportation. Some are simple, and some are highly capital intensive. So clean energy is energy that comes from renewable zero emission sources that do not pollute the atmosphere when used, as well as energy saved by energy efficiency measures. Now, net zero requires huge decline in the use of coal, oil, and gas. Now, this will require stopping the sales of new internal combustion engine passenger cars by 2035, and phasing out all unabated coal and oil power plants by 2040. That's like, about 11, 15 years from now. That's really near. We are all going to witness that, all of us. We're not old enough to escape this. And there's a myriad of rules that serves to change global behavior towards this. Local, international, some are mandatory, some are voluntary, and they all influence supply and demand, provide carrots and sticks, and include mandatory reporting on this. Meanwhile, and this is where it gets important, the available volume of clean energy production is not going to be enough to replace the current demand for energy. And the greenhouse gas reductions that we need by 2050 will come from technologies that are currently just at demonstration or prototype phase. So we need a lot of innovation efforts to make this happen. So to match these developments with the desire to produce, design, manufacture, or sell goods and services that meet market demand, companies increasingly engage in activities that help reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a good thing. They are actually taking action. And where opportune, they also try to make a profit of that. And it includes taking on activities that contribute to the generation of carbon credits or offsets. I make this simple. I call everything carbon credits. But if you're really technically into it, you can go into offsets and other terms for it. Now, also for tax important, the energy transition is going to change highly profitable fuel-based business, generally highly profitable fuel-based business, and replace it with what so far is not profitable, but the business of renewables and greenhouse gas offsets. So we're going to have highly profitable business that was taxed, and we're going to change it into a business that is not yet that profitable, so it's not going to generate as much tax. So there's a thought. So it's no wonder that some countries do not want to participate and drag their feet. We'll have to see what happens with the new administration in the United States, for example. So again, reducing emissions, just mitigation, is considered the best and preferred option to reach this net zero commitment. But phasing out fossil fuel is just not that easy. It's going to be phasing down, but it's not going to be phasing out for the time being. So as a consequence, offsetting your emissions, so doing something to reduce emissions on one side to offset your ongoing emissions, may be the next best alternative, since we're not going to get all the way at once. This conclusion is not universally embraced. Carbon credits are not considered a full substitute for a company's own emission reduction, so that obligation remains. And there's concern in the market about the integrity of carbon credits. Not all voluntary carbon credits represent genuine reductions as a result of double counting or if lax standards are applied. These are all growing pains that need to be resolved. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, which replaced effectively the Kyoto Protocol, allows countries to voluntarily cooperate with each other to achieve emission reduction targets. This means that under Article 6, a country will be able to transfer carbon credits issued for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to help one or more countries meet climate targets. So we're going across borders now. We're trading or selling credits across borders. And without getting into Article 6 more deeply, what you need to know is that it creates the basis for trading in voluntary greenhouse gas emission reductions. The Article 6 calls them mitigation outcomes across country borders. So it's the international trade and sale of a right to emit greenhouse gas. Okay, so you're listening and you're thinking, well, it's just something traded and sold across borders, nothing new for international tax. This is what we deal with in international tax. So now let me put some challenges out there for you with this particular product or issue that we are transferring across borders. What is a carbon credit for tax purposes? The creation of a tradable carbon credit, it converts air, which is a public property, into a private property. For our purposes, a carbon credit. carbon emission rights or allowances are a hybrid between a public and a private right as a result of the regulatory regime. And carbon credits or allowances have a limited shelf life. They usually grant the owner the right to emit a ton of carbon dioxide equivalent only during a specific period. So it's not endless. You can't just keep it in the fridge for 10 years. You have to use it, otherwise you lose it, it expires. And once the carbon credit is used to comply with an emission limit, it's retired. It can only be used once. It can be held for later use, as long as that use is within that specified time frame, or it can be transferred or traded to another person, assuming it qualifies for transfer or trade. So is it a financial product? Is it an intangible? Is it something else? The relevance of its characterization will furthermore be whether that characterization sticks or changes in the event of the application of a treaty for the avoidance of double taxation. Now, for GAAP or for IFRS purposes, emission reduction units have been classified as an intangible asset to be accounted under IAS 38, intangible assets, unless they are to be treated as inventories under IAS 2, inventories, and held for sale in the ordinary course of business. For VAT purposes, it seems that the majority view is that the sale of credits is a service. So that's one part of it. But who is entitled to the value of that carbon credit, to the revenue that it generates from a tax perspective? Okay, so how is this thing born? How does a carbon credit arise? Well, the awarding of a carbon credit, which is called an issuance, is done by organizations, they're called carbon credit registries, to which a claim for carbon credits is done under a recognized and approved program. So you have to submit a claim for that. And there are several organizations that offer carbon credit programs and certification following proper verification. Now you need to have scientists and technical engineers who do that part of the work. And while these organizations may have different standards, all have the same aim to establish a level of scientific integrity that is in sync with their own focus and project requirements.